was some technical difficulties there. So I'll recap that question just because it looked like the YouTube live went out or whatever. So I'm not sure if you guys got the answer to that question, and it was a YouTube question. So, um, so the question was about investor permit holders and niche permit holders, and them not seeing the nil return option in their KRA portal. So what ends up happening is if you did an investor permit and you delayed beginning the business, right? So you have no income, there's no transactions, you haven't actually started the business yet because of whatever reason. That happens sometimes. Sometimes if it's Airbnb, it's construction, right? Like something went over in construction, you're waiting for the building to be finished. It's very standard, normal thing to happen, right? And so if that's the case, then you're probably looking at a no return, right? Because there's been no activity. Okay. And so in those situations, typically, that person would just log in, they would nil return right in January 1st, even though they have until June, just because why not? Right now, when you're jumping in to do the nil return, it's not there. The option is not available, right? So our law firm did call KRA. KRA is saying that the option is not permanently disabled. It's just that they're reconciling ETIMs, right? So if you work directly with us, then you've already gotten a full brief. We've already set you up for ETIMs. Our CPAs have already handled everything. If you work through a third party with us, right? So like if you're one of the folks that came through an agent, agents are not allowed anymore. If you're one of the folks that came through an agent and your agent has not set you up, then let me know. Hey, say hi to McKenna. Okay. Oh, is that Betty? How's it going, Betty? I'll say hi to her for sure. She's still asleep. But if your agent has set you up, then you got to let your agent know that you want to be released directly to us, or have your agent set you up on ETIMs. All right. And break down what all of that needs and what all of that means, right? I think they said it was April. In April, they're going to reopen the nil option, right? So the nil option is not gone. They're just reconciling their ETIM stuff. What is ETIM? Oh, right. So ETIMs is it's like a CRM that's provided for free by the government, right? So if you own a business, like if you own a U.S. business, you would typically use whatever, QuickBooks or PayPal or Stripe or whatever, and then you would issue 1099s to people that you paid who are not employees, right? If they're employee, they get a W-2, right? Or they're a W-2 employee and they get, whatever documentation is appropriate at the end of the year, right? But for independent contractors, we issue these 1099s and all of that stuff, right? And so when we issue the 1099, it's if the person does their taxes and they don't talk about the 1099, like it's in the IRS database and it's attached to their tax profile. So then IRS immediately like flags like, oh, wait, a 1099 was issued and you didn't say anything about it. All right, depending on the amount. Under a certain dollar amount, you don't actually have to say anything about it. All right, so the ETIMs is the same thing. It's just that all of your business transactions would automatically be there, and it's quasi mandatory now, right? So while it's not officially enforceably mandatory, if you don't use it, you can't take business deductions. So any of your deductible expenses and all of that, if they're not logged in ETIMs, it's like they don't exist, whether you have receipts or not, right? Now, if you have receipts, there's like a manual way to log them into ETIMs, so, whatever. But that's where they're moving to. Like if it's a legitimate whatever, it's in ETIMs. If it's not, in ETIMs, then it doesn't exist type of thing. And so all of our investor permit people are signed up on it. If you're not an investor permit, then we didn't talk to you about it. This is for businesses, right? So, I know how our people are. UK class permit holders, don't be blowing up our inboxes talking about nobody told you about ETIMs. It's only for businesses. All right. If you're doing rentals do have ERICs or whatever. They have their own ETIMs. You don't have to do both. You can just stay in, the other one. A lot of people though are saying that they like ETIMS better, so you can choose to do ETIMS instead. All right, but that's why the nil filing isn't there at the moment. Again, when our attorneys reached out to KRA, they said that it'll be back in April. They're gonna get all their ETIMS stuff worked out, and then they'll open it back up in April. So you K permit holders that typically file your taxes on the 1st of January because you don't have a tax liability because you're a K permit holder. You just do a nil return every January 1st. Don't wig out. The option of the nil return is not there because they're doing this ETIMS thing. It's supposed to be back by April. So if you don't see it back by April, then you can get in touch with us, and our CPAs or our attorneys will take the next appropriate steps. All right. Does that answer the question? I think that answers the question. Hi, Elizabeth. How are you? All right, cool. Yeah, investor permits and niche permits. Most of the niche permits are business permits. So investor permits are niche permits. All right. Good. Let's see. Yeah, you look familiar, Betty. What are the niche permit? Like a mining permit. That's obviously a business as well. So if you have like a Class J permit or like one of the niche permits, we haven't done many of those. But it's a business permit, so the ETIMS thing would affect it. Work permit, not so much. Yeah, you're the equivalent of a W-2. You're an employee if you have a work permit, so all your taxes are already handled. And you wouldn't be a nil filer, like you wouldn't be filing a nil return if you're a employee. But your taxes should be withheld, so might still owe something, but most of your taxes should be withheld. I don't have a date for April. Yeah, so wait till April 15th, right? Don't like blow us up on April 1st if the nil thing isn't there. But no, I don't have a date in April. They just said in April. Remember, in Kenya, you have until June, so it's not, you know, it's not a huge rush. All right. Uh, what are the cost of living realities? Okay, I see YouTube is off to the races with the good comments already. All right. Cost of living depends on where you live, right? So I don't know where you're from, but I'm going to make an assumption that you have a little bit of knowledge about like the USA. And so if you live in Manhattan, that is a very different thing than you living in Philadelphia, right? Cost of living is very, very different. And so it really, really depends on where you choose to live. I would say Nairobi is in general the most expensive place to live, right? In general, you could have specific situations that make a place like Nakuru or something the most expensive place to live. So typically if you have some kind of like acute medical or something like that, you're going to want to be in Nairobi or Mombasa, right? So where they have the biggest, best hospitals and all of that stuff, blah, 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 blah. If you don't have something like that going on, then you can start like reaching out. Then you can start looking at like Malindi. You can start looking at Nakuru. You can start looking at Diani. You can start looking at Kisumu. You can start looking at Kakamega. So there's all kinds of places where we relocate people in Kenya, and it really just depends on what you got going on physically and medically and all of that, and the temperature that you like, right? I'm okay with the heat, so I'm here with the palm trees and all of that. But there are places in Kenya that have snow. You go up to the top of Mount Kenya, you can have a snowball fight, right? So there, it just depends on what kind of climate you're looking for, what kind of vibe you appreciate, what you expect to get out of the experience, right? Like if you expect to be every night at a different rooftop bar, you probably want to be in Nairobi or Mombasa, right? You're not going to get that if you move to Kisii, right? So it just depends on what it is you're looking for, and that's going to determine what your cost of living is, right? So if you look at like our end of year special, which there are still two spots open for that, by the way. And so, like, if you look at our end of year special included a bond ladder that would allow you to move to Kenya and immediately stop working and live off of the passive income of the bond ladder, right? That was based on the cost of living in the place where the land is, where we would be building you the house, right? That amount of money that you would get from that bond ladder would not cover your cost of living in Nairobi, right? So it just depends on where you are. Depends on where you are. Like my cost of living is less than 100,000 a month. It would probably be 300,000 a month in Nairobi. So just depends. Just depends on what you're doing, where you want to be, how you want to be there, and all of that stuff. Yeah, sorry, I can't be more specific about that. I would need to know specifically where you're going, how many people are in your family, do you have any medical, you know what I mean? Like it's not a blanket question I can just answer like that. But for a single person, or even a single parent here in Diani who owns their home and is not paying rent, 50,000 a month is more than enough, right? Now, if you were in Nairobi and you owned your house, you'd probably still be paying what they call a service fee, right? Which is like you own your house, but you're still paying rent on it forever. We don't recommend it, but in Nairobi, because it's a city and you're probably in a condo or something like that versus building out your own house, you probably are paying a service charge to be in that condo. And so you're looking at a single parent, I don't know, maybe 120, 150,000, right? So what is that? That's what, three times the cost of living. So just depends. I saw Khalees say that it was expensive, and some other lady in Nairobi who has a relocation company say that it was affordable. Yeah, no, it completely depends on, number one, Khalees moved here as a millionaire. So there's that, right? She's awesome at everything, but she has a certain lifestyle that she's maintaining. So that's number one. And this is a country where like there isn't like an active millionaire market. Like in the United States, there's actually a sub market for millionaires, right? That doesn't, that doesn't exist everywhere. So yeah, for her, it probably is just as expensive, if not maybe even a little bit more. I can see that. But that her experience is not the typical experience. So that's not going to be the experience for most people. Most people are going to find it more affordable. Now, your setup might be a hit, right? Like when you're getting set up, that might be like a shock of cash or whatever to get set up. But once you're set up, it's incredibly affordable. There are months that just like, I don't know, just the flow of the month, I end up spending less than 50,000 for the entire month and haven't changed anything. It's just I didn't go out to eat as much, you know what I mean? And I didn't go out, I didn't spend as much gas because I didn't drive around much that month or whatever. So it'll equal out. But once if you own your own home and your home is like exempt from land rates because it's agricultural or whatever, and stuff like that, then the cost of living goes way, way down. So it just depends on how you're living. We got a lot of clients that are like fully off grid as well. So like their stuff is way, way down as well. That's why, the bond ladder works for our clients, and why you don't see a lot of other relocation firms even utilizing it, because our bond ladders are set up for the specific cost of livings in specific areas, right? So we specialize in it, like we have it down, where as even people trying to like copy it or whatever, they have no idea how to make it work. Right, so we're able to bring people here and then they immediately retire and never have to work again because of the bond ladders. So it's just different, different people specialize in different things, right? I heard the car. You know what? You know what's funny? The cars are only expensive if you're cheap, right? And it's not like, oh, if you're cheap, the price tag. No, the cars are only expensive when you try to buy used cars. Used cars are expensive. New cars are not. So I think I don't know why or how that got confused, but like when we do a package that includes a car, it's obviously a new car. We're not going to a used car lot and buying like a used car and giving it to our clients, right? So you get like right now the best from a warranty standpoint, the best that we got going on right now on the what's it? It's a 7 year. Sorry, it's a 7 year 7 year, what is it, 200,000 kilometer warranty, which is awesome. So that's the best warranty that we have in our vehicle fleets right now. And it costs the same as like the price of the mid luxury version is the same cost as a freaking 20, what is it, 2015 like used Toyota Harrier. Right? Like you pay the same amount of money and it's a brand new car under warranty. If it breaks, they fix her for free because it's under warranty. You know what I mean? Like it's a whole different gambit. So the folks that are like, oh, I'm gonna go get a little used car for nothing, those are the ones that end up being like, oh, buying cars is expensive. Where if you bought a brand new car, it'd have been exactly the same price, but you would have the support of a 7 year warranty, which obviously makes it cheaper in maintenance. And that price is almost identical to the U.S. Manufacturer price, right? So we were doing one on cars a couple months back, and I forget what we were looking at, but it was something that also exists in the United States because there are some cars here that don't exist in the U.S. But it was something that did exist in the U.S. and the price with the conversion was like it was like $700 less than the price they were selling it for, like in Philadelphia. You know what I mean? So it was like 23,000, 700 in Philly and 23,000 in Kenya. So like same difference. So but yeah, so if it's new, then no, they're the regular price. They're the price of a car. If it's used, then yes, because you're essentially paying new prices for used car. I don't really understand how that market works here. The only thing I can think is I remember being a very young man a long time ago, and I remember having a Dodge Shadow, right? So that'll age me, but I remember having a Dodge Shadow, and it broke a lot, but they were cheap. When I say cheap, I remember buying one for $500. Like they were cheap. And I was young and I needed cheap. So I ended up having like four of them and just like ripping, like as they broke, I ripped the parts out of the other one. so so the house I used to have, I had a parking lot in the backyard, about 8 car spaces, right? So what I did was I bought the house from my parents, right? I was young. I wasn't even 20 years old yet. So, but it was cool that I had a house and I was that young. Anyway, I digress. I bought the house, and in the backyard there was a plot, right? A standard row home plot, and that plot it had actually been destroyed by like a racist group, right? They had you know, exploded the house that was on that plot because black people live there, right? So now it was just an empty rock lot. There was no house there anymore. So I had purchased for like $800, and so for me it was like 8 parking spaces. So I ended up having four four Dodge Shadows parked there for parts. Right, so that's what they were there for. And yeah, so that's the only thing that even makes sense in this like used car market out here. So I don't know. Hey George, what's going on? Go ahead and ask your question, and then we'll bring you up. This is a Q&A Sunday, and we're talking about the reality of relocation in Kenya, or using Kenya as a generational wealth center for building generational wealth infrastructure. So if you have a question about either of those, or like to ask me a question about either of those, I'll bring you up. But I don't just bring up new people for random conversation. So I will bring you up, but go ahead and ask your question first so I can screen you a little bit, and then we'll go from there. So yeah, so that's the answer to the question as far as car affordability. New cars, exactly what you expect to spend, wherever you're coming from, basically. Used cars, I feel like they are expensive. Especially since you don't have a warranty. What do I drive? I currently drive a Renault, the French car, a Renault Duster. So I drive a Duster right now. My wife drives a Mazda. So, but she wants a Duster. So I think I'm going to give her the Duster, and I will buy a Cherry, which is Cherry is the Chinese company. They have some really nice cars. So I'm going to give that a shot. What I pay for the Duster, like 3.5. So like, I don't know, like brand new, maybe like $28,000, something like that. Ah, that sounds cool, man. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I would assume that you operate more in Nairobi, huh, George? Yeah, yeah. I have a friend who does more Nairobi stuff. We typically do the coast, right? So we do a lot of Mombasa, Diani, Malindi, Mtwapa, Msambweni, those Nyali, those places like that. So that's like our focus area. We'll relocate somebody anywhere. We just got done building someone a house in Kisi. And then before that, we built somebody a house in Meru. So we'll do anywhere, but we typically don't do Nairobi. We'll do it if somebody really, is pushing for it, but we typically don't do Nairobi. But we do have a friend who they essentially only do Nairobi. So just like send me a I guess a DM, and I'll link you up with her. Oh yeah, yeah, sure, sure. All right, let me see here. Are you still in the play? All right, there we go. What's up, Chief?
Hi, John.
Hey, how
Right.
are you? Let me just adjust my
So,
volume here. All right, go ahead.
sure. I don't know how to turn my camera on. I've not been live again.
No, no problem.
Love your content.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think the first video I watched of yours was around using your savings to live well.
Ah, yeah.
So I noticed you have a family saving culture, and then you invest that and you use the returns to live in Kenya.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So my name is Jogs. I run a company called eBikes Africa. We deliver goods for companies without the headache of managing multiple riders. We work with brands like Art Cafe, Good Life Pharmacy,
Very nice.
Bolt Food, Pizza Inn, Chicken Inn, and many other amazing brands. We employ over around 60 people now.
Nice.
This year we should be providing work to over 800. So my question for you, I'm here with my son.
Not a problem.
My question for you is around the Kenyan culture, and two questions really. They're both connected. First of all, in Africa, timekeeping is not such a. There's barely any public resources, so there's no buses, there's no public transit system. So a lot of Africans, as much as they mean to be there at 9 a.m., they're going to get there at 10.
Right.
And then, so usually, so right now, okay, over the years I've learned that honesty with self is extremely important, and accepting your situation is extremely important. And a lot of Kenyans just don't want to accept. So they'll tell you, hey, I'm going to 9, but then you have no way to get here at 9.
Right.
So I say that people are not being honest to themselves. Now, question number 2, also around the same thing, honesty, is a lot of Kenyans, if that guy needs to become an electrician, he wouldn't be an electrician out of merit. He's going to do the job for 3 months, burn a couple of people, and then, you ask him, can you do electrical work? And he's just going to say yes. And he means well, like he can do electrical work technically. You can do electrical work,
right,
but you're not an electrician.
Right.
So how do you perceive honesty in Kenya and in Africa in general? And how do you perceive the culture? Do you give up? Are you tired of it? Do you think, hey, everyone here's a liar? Or what's your take?
Yeah, so we went around to 34 other African countries before we did Kenya. So I definitely, now that's not every African country, obviously, right? There's 54 countries and maybe 55 territories, right? Depending on how you look at it. But we've been to a lot of them. And so of the ones we've been through, Kenya is by far the best. So there's that. Then beyond that, you're right. Sometimes goodwill and the attempt to be somewhere on time and stuff like that might pop up, but there's an inability to follow through because they don't own the processes that would allow them to follow through. So what you see out here, like we're in Diani, right? So what we do out here is we just go get them. Right. So if you spend the week out here and you're paying attention, it's easy to miss if you don't live here because you don't care who's driving by you. Right. But if you're paying attention, what you'll see that we do out here is we have buses. And it was kind of like an opportunity that some entrepreneurs saw the opportunity and went ahead and capitalized on, where there are buses that they're private buses, but us business owners pay them. And they go pick up our employees and bring them to work. And then so you'll see in the afternoon groups of 20, 30 people standing outside of a hotel or standing outside of a shopping center. And they're actually waiting at the bus stop. It's just private, right? And so our buses will show up, pick them up, take them home, pick them up later, bring them to work, And so because of that, you can put in the employment contract hey, if you're late to work, you're actually costing me money because I'm paying for you to come to work every day in addition to your salary. So if you're late to work, twice, that's it. You're sacked, and it's in your contract, and that's the end of it, right? Which changes, the format. Because what's the excuse at that point? You haven't docked any pay from them, because some employers are a little mean in that way. And I say mean because of what I'm used to. Maybe it's not mean, but in the U.S. we wouldn't dock someone's actual pay for that. It might even be illegal to attempt to do so. So from our perspective, it's mean. And so as we provide this service without charging them for it, we can definitely hold them accountable to if you waste my money. I'm trying to do something nice for you and make sure that you can get to work on time, blah, 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 right? Beyond that, with tradesmen, for us, with what we do, we deal with a lot of vertical integration as far as we own a law firm in Mombasa, and then we have our own architectural firm, and then we have our own general contractor, like vertically integrated. So all of those people are licensed. So like when we build a client of ours a house that we're relocating from the United States, there's a billboard that has to go up, and there's a NEMA number on it, and there's a county number on it, and the name of the contractor and the name of the architect, and like all of this stuff is on it, right? And you're supposed to put that up by law. And so all of our people are licensed, right? And so they're governed by some licensing authority in Kenya. So that does help, right? Even our attorneys, you can just go to lsk.go.ke and like look up them by name and see not only that they're a lawyer, but you can see what kind of law they do. Because to your point, you might encounter a lawyer and that he might be an injury lawyer, and you ask him if he can help you with a land transaction, and he'll say yes. He won't say, well, that's not really the kind of law that I do. He'll just say, yes, I can do it, right? And he'll call all his friends who are actually real estate lawyers and try to figure it out on your dime, right? Which is the problem that you're describing, is this electrician will learn to be an electrician on your money and make the mistakes with your money and figure it out. And so for us, we kind of get around that because we have a bunch of licensed people that we work with. And then if they're hiring like casuals, in our contract, there's an indemnification. So if they're hiring casuals, not only are we indemnified, because sometimes people get lost in the literary value of contracts, right? So they'll get lost. Oh, it says that I'm indemnified. That's great, but the reality of where is the money going to come from to fix this is a whole different situation, right? So until we have a really, really good relationship, yes, we might have that indemnification contract, right? And that might be in there, but we will also force them to hold a certain amount of the fee in escrow with the law firm. And we don't mind if their lawyer is on it as well. So it could be an escrow account that requires two signatures, our lawyer's signature and their lawyer's signatures, to release the money in there. So the money is there, the money belongs to them, so they're not worried about us cheating them. But until they make good, there's a certain amount in escrow there. And so then we don't typically run into those problems anymore of, unqualified people coming in or anything like that. And then, of course, there's an inspection. There's a final inspection, which is a third-party inspector that comes in and makes sure everything is good. And when they sign off on it, which is another indemnification, right? So if the inspector says it's good and then 3 months later it's not good, it's the inspector's fault, right? So they sign off of it, they indemnify us, then our lawyer and the vendor's lawyer goes to the bank, signs, and the money is released. Everybody's happy, right? So it's really, I think what ends up happening is sometimes we don't take as much accountability as entrepreneurs, where we try to do things on winks, nods, and handshakes that should be done based on paperwork and enforcement clauses and escrow accounts that keep people honest. Because your folks who don't know what they're doing, it'll initiate an imposter syndrome in them, right? So as soon as you start talking about signing all this paperwork and having all these things in place, if they know they actually can't perform, they'll get nervous and just disappear. They'll just stop taking your calls, right? So the people who are okay with it are typically the people who have agency to actually get it done, if that makes sense. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, you have. Question around government inefficiency and corruption. So the government is extremely inefficient, and it's kind of on purpose. They don't want to make it better because the officers there make a dime off of it. So how do you maintain your integrity in such an environment? And are you willing to wait longer for services, or do you just go ahead and pay?
Well, yeah, sometimes we're willing to wait longer. Sometimes we push them with the people, essentially, right? So like we had a project that we were doing, and typically what we like to do is we like to hold three, what do they call it here? I call it a press conference, but they have another name for it. It's a public participation. We like to hold 3 of them. So we'll hold one public participation and only invite local people, no government officials of any kind, right? And then we'll talk to the local people. That the tribal elders is fine, but no like national government people. And we'll just figure out what they want, if they're okay with what we're doing, blah, 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 right? So we get done with that. It's a recorded thing, like everything. Their faces don't need to be on record because some of them are skittish about that, but like the audio is recorded, like what, these are the things that the people say they want. And this is the things that the people are concerned about, blah, 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 blah. Then we'll have so the local senator, the local government officials and all that, they'll pop in. We'll do one with them. And typically the senator will say that the people want something that the people haven't said they wanted. And then we'll play the recording and be like, no. This is what your people said they wanted. And they'll typically backpedal and be like, oh, yeah, that too. Right. And then we'll have the KTV one with any national representatives that want to show up, NEMA, whoever wants to show up. And that's the recorded like public participation meeting, which a lot of companies are supposed to do, but don't even know they're supposed to do it. So it doesn't get done. That's actually one of the first steps in like corruption culture, is when you miss something, possibly due to your own ignorance of the system. And then from there, they think they have the right to kind of ask you for, bribes to proceed. Right. And so we'll do all of that. We'll get all of that done. And now we're ready to build whatever it is we're looking to build. We've done the public participation. We have the NEMA. We have the environmental impact study. All the things we're supposed to do are done, right? So we haven't paid anybody to skip anything up until this point. And then we might get to a point where something hits a wall, right? Where somebody's trying to get something. And what'll end up happening is typically like you said, you're hiring 60 people and you got 800 more coming. Right. So typically there'll be something like that going on where there's some people waiting for that work. Right. There's some local people that are like watching us and they're seeing if they can trust us because we said we're bringing these many jobs and they want one of those jobs. And if you keep updating the people publicly as to where you are in the process, and maybe even show them, the government actually has these timetables on all the government websites. So if you have showed them like, the government website says this was supposed to take 2 months. It's been 4. We're not sure what's going on, but we can't hire you guys until it's done. So, and you keep that public dialogue going, the people will identify who's trying to get a bribe. And they'll actually encourage in their own way, right, that person to do what they're supposed to do. Right. So we found that to be helpful. So in America, we have this thing about moving in silence. We encourage people to do the opposite in Kenya and move very publicly. And because the people will end up making sure that those government officials do what they're supposed to do. So the only time it doesn't really work out that way is if it's big business, right? Like we were representing some people who were doing a nuclear power plant down here at the coast. That's a different story altogether, right? You're dealing with like possibly the president's office. Like that's a different situation. But if you're doing just normal business and the people who are in your way are like local, registrars and cabinet secretaries and stuff of that nature, the more public you are, the better off you are. And if you never skip anything, they don't have really a leg to stand on to ask you for anything, right? And if you use your agents, like I very rarely go into any government office asking for anything. My attorneys do that, right? And so, like when we were in Nigeria, we were in this place called Lekki, and we had been stopped by, just local traffic police and just asked for money. Like, just, where are you from? Give me money. Just like that, right? Whereas in Kenya, in the 15 years that I've been here, one traffic cop asked my driver, not directly for money, but they asked them, like, what do you want to do about this? Am I taking you in for a cash bond? But the driver had an expired tag, right? And so that's kind of how things work in our experience anyway, is if you're already wrong, then there's two solutions. You're already wrong, so we go through, the legal pathway and you get your fine, you go see the judge, you get your cash bond, you blah, 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 because you're wrong, or you do something to make me look the other way on this, right? But once you start that, what ends up happening in our experience is that, because we've had clients, we bring in clients that get investor permits all the time, all of that, and some of them go the wrong way. And what we see with them is now there's something missing in their file, right? And they're maybe not even aware of it. So for example, back to public participation, When NEMA opens the file and sees, okay, you have a business plan, you have an investor permit, you have a this, you have a that, you have a master plan, da 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 da. There's no public participation in here. Now, maybe you didn't pay a bribe. Maybe you're just unaware that you're supposed to do it. But in their head, because there's a gap in your file, it to them it means, oh, you've already paid a bribe, so now I need to get mine. But when you present a file to them and there's no gaps and you've done everything exactly the way you're supposed to do it, then they take a step back. Because as you know, every day the EACC, like every day people are arrested for, corruption, right? So it's not as though, the people who would ask you for something are not afraid that you might turn them in, because daily people are arrested for this. So when they see that there's no gaps in your file, they take a step back and they're like, all right, let me not, ask this guy, because this might be the one that gets me arrested. Let me just proceed, right? And so that's how we've, operated. There's been a couple of things. A few years back, we had a company in Kisi, and we had this clause where locals could buy us out of any company that we were doing, right? So if you worked for us, we had the CPA figure out how long it would take. Typically take about 5 years, so it's like a 5-year vest. But after 5 years, with your paychecks, you would get enough shares to trigger a clause in the bylaws that you would be able to buy us out. Nothing we could do about it. Fair market value, blah, 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 blah. Now you own it, now it's local owned, and we just go build something else. We didn't lose anything. You paid for it. And so what happened was the Chinese had ended up paying the locals to buy us out and then take it, and then they fired all the locals, right? So they cut off their nose to spite their face. So we had to go back in and adjust that clause that we had right of first refusal, so that if that happened again, and then the Chinese come in to buy, you'd be legally bound to offer it to us at the same price. Right. And then we could come back in and reacquire it and make sure that locals benefited instead of, sometimes people are, they don't think too far ahead. So it's transparency, I suppose. Right. Things thrive in the dark that don't thrive in the light. So the more transparent your process can be, the least, the less the chance that you're going to run into these kind of corruption situations, if that makes sense. You may still run into one. Like we ran into a guy who kept, giving us some BS. We were building a house for a client, and he worked for Kenya Power, and he kept, giving us some BS about there's only one truck that moves the poles, and that truck is on the other side of the county, and the blah, 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 but then we'd already paid. So then the lawyers just send a specific performance demand, you know what I mean, and let them know that we're ready to go to court. And the next day the truck was there with the pole and the power was set up, right? So sometimes people will still try it, but if you stand firm, you get a reputation for like, no, this is not the guy who's going to pay us, just move on. And then the culture is still a culture of gratitude. That I think is something that Westerners miss sometimes. So we still give out like Christmas bonuses to everybody that we work with. Like they don't have to be employees, right? So like our Kenya Power people, our Jumbo Jet people who book our flights for us, like all of the people who touch our business get a Christmas bonus, but it's not a bribe. It's not for anything in particular, right? So we still have that kind of spirit of gratitude where we're like, hey, thanks for assisting us in business this year. Here's 10,000 shillings or something, or, whatever the case may be. And so then they're like, oh, okay, we don't have to shake them down every time we do something for them. Like at the end of the year, they're going to be grateful anyway, right? So that's helped. That's helped as well.
Hey, that's amazing. Final question. Justify 1 sec. I think let me turn the camera on so you can put a face to the name.
Sure thing.
Well, how do you do this? Okay, my son wants some snacks. Okay, final question.
My boy's gonna wake up soon, probably as well.
My dad. We also have we have a home in Tiwi. I don't know if you know Tiwi.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we also have a home in Mombasa, and My dad's also invested quite heavily in Kilifi. He also does real estate projects. He buys and sells land. So
nice.
his latest project is I think 55 hectare. No, is it? Yeah, 55 hectare property that he's breaking apart and selling.
Okay.
My question is around the cost of compliance.
Uh-huh.
A lot of Kenyan companies that bootstrap don't really appreciate how expensive it is to do things right.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, we're gonna just wing it, and then when we make some money, we're gonna figure it out.
Right. Yeah.
And then 3 years later, 5 years later, the taxman is there at the door with a crazy bill, with crazy penalties. And then a lot of those companies just end up having to fold, and the directors having to go and start something else out.
Yeah.
So, also, John, I didn't notice you've been here for 15 years. I thought it was probably like a year or so. But question to you is, how do you do it as a business person? Do you tell other business people, hey, it's going to be extremely expensive. It's going to cost probably 3 times more than what you think it is.
Right.
I recommend either you fundraise or, do it right the first time.
Yeah.
Do you, in Kenya, with your experience, do you recommend people raising capital? The capital here is very spotty. There's barely any.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your experience been like in terms of this? With your network, with your friends? Do you see a culture of people just starting things, then closing them, and then starting something else? Would you recommend probably we start some more VCs? How do you see the business culture here, especially starting out and raising capital and the cost of compliance?
Yeah, no, I definitely think there should be more VCs. I definitely think that should happen. I'm not certain that it should be done the same way that we do it in the US, though. But I guess that's a whole different live, isn't it? But I do think that there should be more VCs for sure. That's number one for sure. The bulk of our clients are American, right? We deal with British, we deal with Canadians. There's been some Caribbean, and there's been some Swedish, oddly enough. But the bulk of our clients are American. And then we had a tranche of like Chinese for a while, right? And so what we see most is
Let me just
go ahead. Go ahead.
A lot of Kenyans actually do not want to pay for compliance.
Right.
So Kenyans prefer cheap. If you could give it to them for free and pay them, like, sure, that's what they take.
Right.
So a lot of Kenyans would rather, pay that bribe, give me lower quality, and just make the price.
100%. 100%.
So I could see you shopping outside for customers.
Yeah, no, that's 100% correct. And then when they come, what it is, some of it's structuring, right? So example of that would be, we had a client come in and do a beach resort, a very boutique. They only have 10 rooms, but a very boutique beachfront resort here in Diani. And so their booking company, their booking company is in Seychelles. It's an IBC in Seychelles, right? So the corporate tax rate of an IBC is 0%. So they have an international booking company in Seychelles. It's an IBC, so its corporate tax rate is 0%. So for international bookings only, any local bookings have to, go straight through. But for international bookings, they're able to kind of utilize a loophole. And so those bookings end up being tax exempt because they're coming through that Seychelles booking company. So that Seychelles booking company is paying a preferred rate, same as, booking.com would, right? So they're paying a preferred rate, and then there's taxes being paid on that preferred rate, right? But then you have a margin that's being held offshore that is exempt from taxes legally, right? So your margin between the booking company and whatever the preferred rate is, and in order to make it an arm's length deal, right? Which means that essentially from a tax perspective, it means that the deal you've created with yourself is identical to the deal you would have if it was booking.com. Or if you had a Hilton franchise and you were paying Hilton global fees, right? So you want to make sure that your fees are the same, right? So that there's no self-dealing accusation that can be made. But as long as that is true, then those fees become an additional kind of margin for that from that IBC that can be pushed back into the company as owner's capital or whatever the case may be later, to kind of offset the expense. So sometimes it's structuring, like sometimes you can just do some structuring stuff like that and reposition yourself. Sometimes it's a matter of systems. So sometimes you got to go in like real lean, real quick, or you do like vendorships, right? With indemnification. So you bring in a vendor, you make sure that that vendor has the licensing, the whatever, they're supposed to have, right? So, they don't necessarily need to have a company certificate because they could be a sole proprietor, right? But you make sure that if they need any kind of license, typically your county business license is the one that they'll definitely need. So county business license, KRA PIN, tax compliance certificate, essentially, right? And then you kind of 1099 the stuff out to them, utilizing those same safeguards. Like half your money is going to be in escrow. So if you screw this thing up, like you're not going to get paid. You know what I mean? It is what it is. And you go through that process. They might do exactly what you just talked about. Like as a Kenyan, they might cut corners, but you're indemnified from that, right? You hired them to do a job. You expected them to do it legally. And if they didn't do it legally, that's not your problem, right? So make sure your advocate is very serious about how, those documents are drawn up and that you are indemnified by any nonsense that they might do. And that you're, making sure that the tax compliance is there and that you're using ETIMs and that you know what I mean, all of that stuff. But sometimes that's also a way to go. So you want to do here, especially, you want to do what you're a specialist in. That's all you want to do. All the other stuff, you want somebody else to do it. Somebody who says that they're a specialist in that and who's willing to kind of put their money where their mouth is, and take on the liability for that, and then let them do it the Kenyan way. If they want to do it the Kenyan way, let them do it whatever way they want to do it. That's their business, right? And then you go, forward from there. So that's typically how you negate that. The bigger you get, then the easier, obviously, it gets, right? Like we saw Safaricom just raise money with a tax exempt bond certified by the CMA, right? So like the bigger you get to a point where you can now, ask the government, hey, don't charge me any taxes for this, and they might say yes, right? But yeah, when you're just getting started, that's how I would do it, and then go from there. So offshore structuring, we do a lot of. We do a lot of offshore structuring just to kind of give people some breathing room, which sucks. They shouldn't have to do it that way. But then beyond that, because so many of our clients are coming from like the US, they'll do a lot of local financing. And then there's some offshore stuff like with that. So like the IRS has a thing called foreign dividends received. It's not a credit. What is it? Foreign dividends received deduction, right? So if you have a C corporation, it has to be a C corporation in the United States, and the C corporation owns 10% of your Kenyan business, you can make dividend payments to that U.S. company, and those dividend payments be 100% tax exempt if you meet the criteria, which is that C corporation has to have owned the 10% for 365 days prior to the distribution and blah, 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 blah. Right. So that's a way that you could essentially expatriate back. And then what you do, what those people are typically doing is they're taking financing in the United States for their Kenyan affiliate. They're showing the cash flow and distributions going back to the United States in order to qualify for the financing. They're getting the lower interest rates that they can get from U.S. banks. And then if it all falls apart, they have Chapter 11 bankruptcy, right? So they can fund their entire Kenyan operation legally, because that company does own the Kenyan company. Typically, they have to do a little bit more. That 10% is an IRS minimum. Typically, for the loan stuff, you need like 25% ownership. So they'll do that. They'll get the loans in the United States at like, I don't know, 6-7%, right? Versus the maybe 20% that they would be paying here, right? They funnel the money through, build out everything they want to build out, buy all the equipment they want to buy, pay all the licensing that they need to pay, blah, 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 blah. And then they'll try to do those dividends and try to pay it back, right? But the good thing about the United States is that if it doesn't work, the safety net is bankruptcy. So then you go restructure all the debt or possibly even discharge all that debt. But you still have, all the physical things in Kenya that are in place, right? So we've had a lot of people like do that with like farms, like they get the Caterpillar trucks and the diggers and all of that stuff and the drip irrigation systems and $200,000, $300,000 worth of loans from the United States. They try to pay them back, but there's a hiccup, and then then they file bankruptcy. They discharge that debt in the United States, but they still have the entire farm in Kenya, right? And so that's one of the strategies that get utilized as well. So if you already have everything, it's not as expensive, right? If you're trying to build operations and do compliance and all of that, that's where it becomes a little bit more expensive, up front, and that's where like venture and all of that type of stuff could help. Venture kind of works the same way. Like venture capitalists expect that really only 30% of their bets are going to break even and only 10% are going to pay for the rest, essentially. So out of 10 companies that they invest in, they expect 7 of them to just fail and lose their money, and then they expect out of the 3 that are left, 2 of them are just going to break even, and then one's going to be like the unicorn, right? And pay for all of the ones that failed. So same kind of situation, just using debt instead. And so that's another technique we see often. So it's really about the planning. Because the expense is there, the planning becomes more important.
So we have raised, and we raised from an impact investor, and he did use the exact method you said. So Delaware C Corp, and then 25%, and then raise debt, and then you're competitive in Kenya because the interest rates here are crazy.
Yeah.
Question around tax efficiency. This could go on forever.
That's okay.
But if there's anyone else who wants to take part, please.
Oh yeah, sure.
Feel free. Yeah. So, question. I haven't figured out how to turn on my camera though. Just FYI.
I'm not sure if I can do it. Let me see. It might.
So.
It might be the number of followers you have. It says you don't have camera access.
Okay. No problem. So around tax efficiency and structuring, we have the tax is really expensive, and we're right now in the process of setting up the C Corp.
Okay.
And also a Mauritius holding company.
Okay.
We're basically having to split the company into 3 sons, and then have it held in different jurisdictions.
Right.
So what would you recommend for people who are starting out, Mauritius, Seychelles, or just go to Delaware, do a C Corp? Yeah.
So Seychelles was on the gray list for a while, which is why people sometimes go to Mauritius. Mauritius isn't bad. What is it, 1.5 or something like that? Like 1.5%, So it's not a huge number. Seychelles is 0, so 0 is definitely 0. But Mauritius is not a huge number, so it's not that big of a deal. I think sometimes depending on which bank you're using, it's easier to get money from Mauritius to Kenya than from Seychelles to Kenya, depending on the bank you're using. The banks that we have our best relationships with, it doesn't matter. We've never had an issue either way with any of our clients doing Seychelles or Mauritius. We'll typically do like ultra high net worth trusts, asset protection trusts in Mauritius, and then we'll do like high net worth trusts for those clients in Seychelles. Just because of the robustness of the dual tax avoidance agreements. That's another thing. Mauritius might have a dual tax avoidance agreement with Kenya that Seychelles doesn't. So that's another factor. Yeah. So that might even make up for the 1 point whatever percent tax, whatever. So that might definitely be a good position to be in as far as that's concerned, especially if the company is going to actually do cross-border business. The other kind of example that I had given you with the booking company, they're not technically doing cross-border business. Like they're technically not doing any business in Kenya at all. So the DTAA doesn't matter, right? So in your situation, it might make sense to use Mauritius based on whatever treaty is in place. So it sounds right. It sounds like you're doing the right things as far as maybe a funding Delaware C corp and then a holding company in Mauritius and then an operating company in Kenya. So it kind of sucks that we got to do all that, but it's not outside of the realm of even in the U.S. sometimes we do the same thing. We used to use the British Virgin Islands back in the day when that was viable. It's not anymore, but we used to do that. So it happens. But it sounds like your setup is right. It sounds like you'll be able to tap into like U.S. venture through Delaware. They like Delaware. U.S. venture likes Delaware, and then global. It's about the Chantry Court. It's they just number one. There's no tax in Delaware, and then there's the Chantry Court that has very long precedent, so they know exactly what happens if X happens. This is going to be the judgment. If Y happens, this is so that's why they love it so much. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, it looks like you're in a good position. The thing that I would remind you of is that once you can show kind of proof of concept, sort of, you can influence. Not necessarily parliament, but which you can, obviously you can, but you probably have to like lobby and campaign funds and all of that. So that's a different thing, right? But the what you can influence is like procedural governance, right? So like I have a friend with a relocation company in Nairobi, and so she's finally gotten the government to like back the relocation efforts that she's doing, right? But it's within governance, so it's like Kenvest, immigration, like it's not parliament, because that would have been a whole different journey for her, right? So if you can show that that you're creating like a viable industry, then you can get the whatever regulatory bodies that are above that that industry, or that should be above that industry, to kind of come on board and almost allow you to operate as a think tank. So we've seen that multiple times. The other thing that you can do is get an investor certificate, right? Like are you Kenyan? Like, are you a Kenyan citizen?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so there is a Kenyan citizen certificate. A lot of people think that investor certificates are only for foreigners. You can get a Kenyan citizen certificate, and depending on what you're doing, it can give you like a 3-year tax holiday, right? And for a Kenyan, I want to say it's 100,000 shillings. See, for a foreigner, it's $100,000. But for a Kenyan, it's like 100,000 shillings or something like that, which if you're in business is worth it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yes it is. Is this the one where you get registered at the Nairobi International Financial Center?
Possibly, but I know it's from KRA. So there might be like a KRA booth at the financial center where you get set up. We do everything in Mombasa. But you can go to KRA's website and just put in investor certificate, I believe, or investor permit, with either or, and it'll bring it up, and then it'll say foreigner, and then it'll say like citizen. And you go down to the citizen one, and you can see what benefits you get. But they do have the ability to set something up where they mitigate the high cost, because I think they get it. You know what I mean? I just think that a lot of those programs they just don't talk about, right? So people are struggling, and they're not like, "Hey, just go over here and apply for this thing, then don't pay taxes for 3 years," but they, there are things that exist.
So we have, as an industry, lobbied Parliament to get tax exemption. We have tax exemption on our electric bicycles.
Excellent.
We've built around 700 so far in Kenya. We've put about 150 on the road.
Nice.
Sorry, about 250 on the road.
Awesome.
So, yeah, I've also done a law before. I passed a law in Kenya at the age of 19 called the Unclaimed Financial Assets Act and Regulations. So in case you die without a will, where does your money go? In the States, it's that, right? But yeah, in a lot of states, it's that. So I get what you're saying about lobbying and how much work it is.
Yeah.
And using procedural institutions like authorities rather than parliament.
Yeah.
That's really smart.
Yeah, it helps and it streamlines things, you know, and then they can go to parliament. You know what I mean? Like they can do a parliamentary report and, you know, but much easier than you going to parliament.
Very true. This has been really insightful and I'm super grateful. I didn't know about the investor certificate.
Yeah.
That is something we need to work on right now.
Definitely.
So thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Unfortunately, yeah, I have to go.
Yeah, not a problem.
But I'd love if you could, you know, check out our website, see the work we do.
Definitely.
You know, we could connect on LinkedIn.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, definitely. And I'll definitely pass it on to a couple of VCs, you know, from back in the old country.
Can I reach out when I'm in the coast?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I just followed you back. Go ahead and like DM. This is actually the account beneath you is my personal account. Send me a DM there, and you know I'll send you like my WhatsApp number and all that stuff.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
Have
no
a
problem.
lovely day.
Great talking to you. Have fun, my
wish to be
friend.
where you are. It's really beautiful.
Yeah,
The palm trees and the sun. Wow.
How about it? Yeah, Diani is one of my favorite places. Meru is definitely my second favorite. I love spending time in Meru. All right, my friend. Have a good one and go have fun with your son. My son's gonna wake up any minute now. So have a good one. All right. YouTube. Sorry. I know I was ignoring you guys a little bit there because my attention was on TikTok. It's unfortunate that you guys can't like come up on YouTube. So if you guys want to ask questions like that, you got to come over to TikTok or you have to just type it out. All right. So yeah. What kind of investors? I think you mean investments, right? What kind of investments get the tax holiday? It depends. There is a list on KRA. I don't have it memorized. I know medical is definitely one. So if you want to come open up a hospital, I'm pretty sure you get a holiday, and there are different holidays. So some of them are percentages. So some of them they'll be like, all right, your tax rate is 10% instead of 30% for the first 10 years or something like that, you know. So there are different kind of levels to it. But anything is better than nothing, obviously. So it's all beneficial. But you just got to go in and see what it is that they're offering. That's a good question, though. Oh, there's the question I missed. Oh, yeah. So, we had that kind of, I guess it's like an employee stock ownership program, but it's not the ESOP program, right? And so we had that written into any of the bylaws for any of the companies we do that hire a significant amount of people and have an impact in a local area. So we had, you know, like that was a Kisi thing that we had it was a company that imported engine parts from Dubai and then did like vehicle repairs and then, you know, had large scale contracts, you know, fixing county vehicles and stuff like that. And so we wanted to make sure that, you know, especially if you're dealing out in the counties like that, right? You're not in Nairobi, you're not in Mombasa, you're not whatever. If you're in, you know, someone's ancestral land, you give them the option to be able to buy you out and for the community to then own that, right? We personally feel as though that's only fair. And so, but we did have to adjust that with the right of first refusal because back then some Chinese had come in, and I don't know what they told them, you know what I mean, but they did essentially pay them to buy us out, and then they bought the business and then they fired all of them. So it didn't it and I'm sure they didn't pay them very much. And I'm sure there were promises that were not in writing that were broken, and they were just taken advantage of. So unfortunately, you can only lead a horse to water. You can't make them drink. So we try our best to protect people even from themselves, which is what the right of first refusal is for. But yeah, that's what that was about. If you're still here, I'm so sorry I missed. I know I spoke about that a while ago. So sorry I missed that question. Ooh, no, that's not the greatest mentality to have in our experience. No, we don't sell our baby because businesses aren't babies. And if you're thinking about your business as a baby, that's a mindset issue. You got to come to terms with that. All right. Businesses are assets. Assets are meant to be traded and sold. And so if you're treating a business like it's your baby and you can't sell it, and it's then it's going to end up probably destroying you, right? If you can't change it, sell it, leverage it because you think it's the equivalent of a human child, then you're going to have a real tough time, unfortunately. So maybe you should make that your hobby and do something else as a business if that's the way you feel about it. My hobbies are not for sale, and I don't care if I lose money doing them, because that's what's going to happen. You treat a business like a baby. When it's losing, you're going to hold on to it anyway, and then your family suffers because you're pumping money into this business that's failing, but you don't want to let go of it because you think it's a baby. So I definitely look into that mindset a bit more. Yes, yes, absolutely. Yep. Yep. Labor, for me anyway, labor can always replace capital, right? So if the labor wants to take over the company, that they can have at it. All right. That's just for me. You can do whatever you want in your own, and most hopefully you're successful. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, yeah. So there's a thing called corporate citizenship, right? So if I move into somebody's neighborhood with my company, there's a corporate citizenship that I should be held to as a matter of business ethics, right? So if that neighborhood decides that they don't like the way that company is impacting their neighborhood, there should be a civil recourse that they can take where they can decide to take on that company, and hopefully they manage it well, but not at a loss, you know, to the people who created the company. So that's where the buyout factor is, right? So if you want to buy them out, fine, that's not a problem. Yeah. Oh, thank you for liking the live. Oh, thank you for sharing the live. I always forget to tell people to do that. How do you like? Oh, that's a TikTok thing. You can't do it on YouTube. Sorry about that. Huh. That's interesting too. Some of your comments are like, hmm. Oh, I think it's asking me to approve them. So, okay. So maybe some of your comments the other people can't see because I haven't approved them. Interesting. Yeah, very, very different platforms. We go live on a few platforms and they're all very different. Ah, okay. So, I mean, owner's capital, it depends. I mean, you could structure it as a loan, you know. So you could do that, and then it's debt. So then obviously you don't pay taxes on debt, right? So you could loan the company capital, right? And so there's just a bunch of different structures you could use for that. Really, you want to look at your overall kind of structure, like what type of companies you're operating, and then what options are available to those types of companies that you're operating. Because like when we were talking about the dividend receive deduction, only a C corp can do that. So if you have an S corp or a corporation being taxed under subsection S of the IRC, or you have an LLC not taxed as a C corp, or you have a limited partnership, or sole proprietorship, or a general partnership, or a public benefit corporation, or a private operating foundation. There's all types of different business structures, right? But the only one that can utilize that is a C corp. So it just depends on what your setup is like. Because if you have the C corp, then maybe that's the way to go, and then you legally wouldn't have to pay any U.S. taxes on it. If you don't have the C corp, then maybe you have to do something differently. So it really that's a pretty nuanced question. Unfortunately, I can't answer it really without knowing the entire situation. But ask your tax person. Like if you have a person, which you should, if you're in business now, you should have a tax person. Ask them which makes the most sense on the U.S. side, and then you would want to get with a local tax person to figure out what makes sense locally, and then you know implement as much of that as you can. It's difficult sometimes if you're like focused on doing stuff your way in a different country, right? That's where most people's headaches come from. They're used to doing business in America, they're used to doing business in the UK, they're used to doing business in Canada, and they think it should be that way here versus just learning how to do business here, right? So that's the least stressful way is like just learn how to do business here and do it this way instead. Yeah, well, so that's universal to all immigration departments, right? U.S. immigration to, Grenadian immigration, which we've dealt with, right? Which is a small island with population of like 80,000 people, right? Vanuatu, we have clients that we do passport portfolios and all that. So we've dealt with these really small countries from small to big. Immigration is immigration. And one of the things that all immigration companies have, or uh, divisions have in common is that they have a mandate to protect local jobs from foreign, workers, or even foreign business people, right? And typically, it extends even to volunteerism because the mindset of immigration is if you weren't there to do the work for free, then maybe they would have had to pay a local to do it, right? So I know a lot of people get bent out of shape, like I'm trying to volunteer, they won't let me help the people for free. That's not the way immigration sees it. Immigration sees it as if you'll come do carpentry work for Habitat for Humanity and build a house for free, then that might be taking away a paying job of a local carpenter who would have been paid for that work, right? Because you're in a position where you don't need, money per se, to do that. So immigration sees things very specifically, and there are some universal aspects of that, right? And so one of those aspects is to make sure that you're a net positive to the economy versus a negative in any way, right? And so the permits that you have to get to do business internationally typically make it more expensive of a proposition. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to hedge that the people coming to do business are going to be the people who know business better and have the runway, which is the money that you spend before you start making money, to keep that business open and pay employees for a legitimate amount of time, right? So they like to see that you can keep the business open for like 2, 3 years without making any money, and which is the same standard in the United States, right? In the United States, they'll look at 5 years of business to see if you've made any profit in those 5 years before they decide whether you're a hobbyist or whether you're a real business, and so on and so forth. So it's the same type of standard. So when you come in as an investor permit internationally, one good thing is they don't take the money. Some countries do, right? So in Kenya, you just have to show, you have to put $100,000 in a local account, but it's still your $100,000, right? So that's the way that works. Do I have an in-person consultation? If you're in Diani, Kenya, I do, yes. So if you want to come to Diani and do an in-person consultation, you'll see it. If you go to our consultations, there's going to be options of where to have it. And when you open up the options, it'll either be online or it'll say if you're in Diani in person. And so we have people who actually do fly out here for certain consultations. They typically are doing big things though, right? So when we talked about that beach resort, where we set up all the stuff in Seychelles and we did all the different, funding arrangements and all of that in the US and whatnot. That was a big deal, right? That's like a $1.5 million deal. So they had no problem flying over here just for the meeting. So the bigger the deal, typically the more people will, just fly in for an in-person meeting. Yes, sometimes that happens and sometimes I'll do it. So yeah, sometimes people will fly me to them if that makes more sense. We were doing a trust that owned a IBC. So we had a Mauritius trust that owned the Seychelles IBC, that owned a bunch of other businesses, and then we set up a Singapore family office. And so they sent a private jet, right? And so they flew me to them because it was worth it for them to fly me to them versus them flying to me, because they had so many moving parts. So they had that, I got there, and there's like 30 people in the boardroom. So for them to come to me, they would have had to bring all 30 people to me and set up arrangements for all 30 people to have a place to sleep, for a week or whatever. So it just made more sense for them to send a jet and put me up for a week and have me come to them. So, it's whatever makes sense. Those are very specific clients. Yeah. Their percentage of our client base is low, but they pay well. So their percentage of our revenue base is not equal to their percentage of our client base. Yeah. No, well, you got to start from somewhere, right? So that's where we get into the generational wealth trust side of our business, where those are just regular people. They're not super rich or anything like that, but their families will be, right? So they're setting up the groundwork to make sure that their families really become powerhouse families in a generation or two, which from a financial standpoint is very, very easy and very simple to do. The hardest part of that for them is now to implement all the education that goes along with that. So all the financial literacy, all the psychology. There's a lot of psychology. There's a lot of sociology as well. So implementing all of those things that allow you to create really a powerhouse family. That's the hard part. The money is super, super, super easy because all you're doing is letting money compound over time. So the money is ridiculously easy. Like you could literally put like $1,000 in a compounding trust, let it compound for 60 years, and end up with $1.8 million off of that $1,000, right? So that part is dumb easy, as long as no one touches that while it's compounding, right? The smaller the amount of money you put in, the longer amount of time it takes to compound. But that's ridiculously easy. So a lot of folks will come in and they'll do a generational wealth trust for their grandkids, and so they'll set that foundation so that their family finally gets out of the situation that it's in. But you also need to have the education to maintain that. So what you do is you let the trust handle that. So as the trust compounds, when it gets to, I don't know, $250,000 or something like that, and then it starts paying for the education. So it starts bringing in these educators and pay. Because how do you teach your family something you don't know? Because if you knew it, your situation would be different, right? So the things you don't know that are keeping you in the situation you're in, how do you teach that, right? So you end up allowing the trust to hire in people to do that. So, like we'll have trusts that fly in, like Stanford professors, for 1 week a year during the family reunion, which is also the annual meeting of the family trust, to teach the kids. So you'll have like a Harvard professor that teaches MBA finance at Harvard. You'll pay for his family to come meet you guys in the Seychelles or something, or meet you guys in the Maldives, right? Which is a great little family vacation for him. But for 3 days out of that vacation, he has to take 3 hours a day and teach your kids Harvard level financial literacy. You know what I mean? So those are the things that end up making sure that you can still pass on the knowledge necessary to maintain that kind of family legacy, even if you don't know how to do it, right? And by then you might not even be around, right? So that's how it's done in a nutshell. Yeah, no, we're as a company, we're set to do 100 of those this year. So it's January, we just started, but we've gotten six. We got six going so far. So we're set to do 100 generational wealth trusts. And really make an impact like that. That's so impactful. Typically, you know, especially depending on how young people get married. Typically, you can see over 100 people while you're alive affected by one trust. If you go to our TikTok, I don't think this is on YouTube. Maybe we'll put it on YouTube just so you guys can see it. But if you go to our TikTok, there's this video of these folks that got married. I think they got married. I want to say they got married in the 40s, right? So they're old, right? But there's over 100 of them. They had 6 kids. Those kids had kids, and there are some like great grandkids that are alive now as well. So you got these two old people sitting in the middle, and the 100 people that came from them, right? And color coded T-shirts to show which branch of the family they come from. And some of their kids didn't have kids, right? So some of the 6 children they had aren't even part of the equation, right? And so that's what happens with these generational wealth trusts, right? You're in a situation where over 100 people can be impacted within your lifetime, right? So by the time you're gone, it really balloons out, and you can really impact the future of your family and what their optionality looks like. Right, yeah, you don't have to make additional payments. There's a couple of ways that we do it. Number one is you just let it compound. You put in whatever the hell you're going to put in, and you just let it rock, right? You let it compound for however many years it needs to compound. The other way to do it is to create some sort of security, like ladder. So you would create securities that pay out at a certain time. Right now, it's a bond ladder because the bonds are really great currently. And they're reopening like the best of the bonds. Like last year, there were no new bonds. The Kenyan government didn't issue a new bond all year. Every single auction that we bought for our clients last year was a reopening of a previous bond. So we may see the same thing this year. But those bonds, if you ladder them properly, they'll pay out every single month, right? So now those bonds are paying into that trust every single month, right? And that's increasing the compounding effect, right? So now what might have took you 60 years might only take you 20, because now you have that increase in the compounding effect, right? But if you can't do that, then it takes 60 years. So what? If you do nothing, your family suffers in poverty forever, right? So it doesn't really matter how long it's going to take as long as you have the will to do something. But if you have the ability to set up a bond ladder or something like that, then at least you would compound decompounding by making those additional payments without making any payments at all. Because the payments that are coming in, they're called coupon payments. They're the return on investment of the bond. So you can put that money in there, forget about it, go on about your life, and every month the bond is making payments for you, right? And then when your heirs get to whatever age or whatever trigger event it is that starts getting them money, then the trust is there and it's ready to go. It's not as complicated as people make it seem, right? It's just that the language in the trust has to be really, really, really on point. So that's where the difficulty is. That's where you really need a professional, because if the language isn't right, you're going to screw yourself up. Or your trust might be unenforceable, or it might not be able to pay out to your heirs because you used the wrong language, so on and so forth. All right. Oh, thank you for the likes. I see we're at 6,000. Thank you on the TikTok side. I appreciate that. All right. Any other questions here? We've been out this for about an hour and a half. Any other questions? Does anybody else want to come up and ask any questions on the TikTok side? If you're on the YouTube side and you do want to speak directly to me, then you need to come over to TikTok, unfortunately, and then request up. But if anybody wants to ask something out loud, we can do that. And if not, then it looks like we're done today. All right, I don't see any. Let me check. Yeah, I don't see any requests. I don't see any questions. So I guess we've covered it all for today. If you're writing something, just hit enter, and I'll wait for you to finish it, or just request up, and I'll get you up here. And if not, then I'll get ready to take my son to the beach. All right, guys, it has been a pleasure as always. Tomorrow is Monday. Soon, this is probably the last week that I'll be going live every day. And we'll start doing shows. So on the TikTok side, I'll probably go live and you guys will be getting behind the scenes stuff. On the YouTube side, those shows will just premiere on a schedule, so you'll be able to see the same kind of thing on YouTube that you've been getting. It just won't be live. All right. All right, guys. Talk to you guys later. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you same time tomorrow.